Hey guys, I am so excited right now. I just got done interviewing Cynthia Sue Larson, one of my very favorite writers of all time. If you've ever asked if there are parallel realities, how can we travel through them? If you've listened to my other podcasts where I talk about quantum jumping, even within reality transurfing, Cynthia Sue Larson provides the scientific backbone for reality transurfing, and I got some of her perspective about all of these fascinating subjects. I learned so much. It is one of the best interviews I've ever had on the Reality Revolution, and I can't recommend it enough. You have to check it out. Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm so incredibly excited to have Cynthia Sue Larson with me today, one of my very favorite authors in the world. Cynthia Sue Larson is a renowned writer that's written several books, and my favorites are Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifting. She is a transformational speaker, a best-selling author. She's been on TV and radio. You probably have seen her. One of her favorite questions is, how good can it get? She's received a BA degree in physics from UC Berkeley and an MBA degree at San Francisco State University. And she has a wonderful website, realityshift.com, and is, I consider, one of the experts in discussions of things like quantum jumping and parallel realities. And hello, Cynthia. So excited to have you on the Reality Revolution. Thank you.
Yay. Glad to be here. Yeah, I'm so glad to be talking about this topic. It's still my favorite after all these years.
Absolutely, 100%. So just a little background, and I was just talking to Cynthia before this. I had gone through a crazy event where I experienced these major reality shifts after something had happened. It felt like I was walking around and the world I was in was completely different. Like I had noticed buildings had come up and objects had started to reappear. And I was at a really tough time in my life, and I thought, I need to go to the doctor. I'm probably insane. There's something wrong with me, because I was seeing things that didn't fit with my previous reality after a major event had happened. And then I came upon, and I had read this book before, but it was just to read it again, but Quantum Jumps, and you have a book and Reality Shifts, and it talks about these occurrences and phenomenon where people see reality shift in front of them, where they do quantum jumps. And it made me to realize I wasn't insane. And when I began this podcast and this YouTube channel, my number one on my number one list was, I want to interview Cynthia Sue Larson. Of course, that wasn't going to happen with the first video, but I finally got to interview Cynthia today. And so this is a huge day. I'm super excited. So welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you had that recent experience, because there's nothing like an experience to
It is exciting.
Get somebody fully on board. Yeah,
you can go insane. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, that's true. And when I started this back in the 1990s, when I was first looking to see who's writing about this, what can I learn? Who else is experiencing this? I really didn't see much, and that was the early days of the internet. That was way before blogging, before social media. You have to kind of put your mind back in that frame. But people that did run across what I was doing were so grateful for the same reason that you're expressing, just because you see something completely different. Buildings show up that were not there before. We're talking entire buildings, businesses, and it can be shocking. So
it is very shocking. Absolutely. And so you were inspired to write this because you had experienced reality shifts as well? What was when you started writing? Both of these books are similar, but a little bit different. They both kind of have their own idea, but I wanted to get an idea of your inspiration when you wrote this, and your story.
What triggered it was I went through a Kundalini awakening in 1994, and then it took me a number of years to integrate that experience. The reason that is so significant is because running that much internal ki or energy is very much like going through a near-death experience. It activates things. So I was suddenly in the thick of a whole bunch of reality shifts, to a point they were undeniable, even though I was that lone voice in the wilderness at that time, or so I thought. I decided, okay, let's become a central hub for this so people can share their experiences. And through the website, realityshifters.com, they'll be able to know. But I was talking to my friends. I was asking, have you ever experienced this?
Right.
Because once it happens to you, you want to talk to everyone about it.
Yeah, you do.
And so a lot of people, they back away like, oh, this sounds nutty.
Yeah.
Even if you do describe this makes sense to me, I'm trying to put it together and I can understand from my point of view, we would expect to see some occasional quantum effects, quantum phenomena on the daily macroscopic scale. So that means you expect to see things teleporting, transforming, just instantaneous changes. You sort of would expect to see that, although it's mind-blowing. And then now we are seeing it. So I was asking my friends, have you ever noticed this? And I think that was the pivotal moment. We were on a walk having our brunch down at the Berkeley Marina. And just when I raised the question, serendipitously, synchronistically, right in front of us was a gigantic sculpture that had never been there before. We were all stopping and staring at it speechless because we're all thinking the same thing. Where did this come from? And the topic I had just raised was reality shift. And so we were looking at it together. And that's when my friends were saying, well, this is interesting. And I said, this is what I'm talking about.
Well, it's a very unusual to share a reality shift like that. But the unique thing, and you're right, in this genre, in the literature, there's not a lot of literature about this. There's physicists talking about parallel realities, and there's some mystics that explore the idea behind it. The beautiful thing is that you marry both. You take, in your book, the physics. And anybody that's listening or watching this, if you do not understand the physics behind this stuff, and a lot of these books will casually throw out these phrases like quantum tunneling and quantum entanglement without really an explanation. Your book does a fantastic job of explaining how this stuff works. And that's, I am no expert, and you guys can call me out on it. I talk about physics all the time. But if you really want to understand this, because sometimes it's way over your head, go and read these books, because you go and explain all the different models. And you explain how these models could fit. You do a really good job of saying it doesn't have to be all of these models. And you say, hey, we can marry these together like we're cooking in the kitchen, and we can pick some of the best things. And when you explain that, and once you understand what's happening on the microscopic scale, you make a very good argument in Quantum Jumps that these things are, because the big argument, of course, you probably had, you talk to a quantum physicist and they say, that's all good, but it's only happening on the microscopic scale. And you do a really good job in the book of explaining, no, this is happening on the macroscopic scale as well. And we're seeing examples such as diamonds and other things that are happening in a room that we can see with our naked eye, that are such as all kinds of different quantum effects. And this book really is an eye-opener for me. And so you got a degree in physics, and so, but you do a terrific job. Physics can be kind of complicated, and you do a terrific job of explaining it so that people can understand. So since the book's been published, a lot of stuff has been coming out. So my next question is, tell me a little bit more about, is there been some new discoveries, new things that have happened that you could add as an addendum that kind of substantiate or further our understanding of what's going on?
Yes, there actually is quite a bit going. That's what's so exciting about being in this field for so long and having the background in physics that I do, thank goodness, because then when I witness some of the theoretical physicists who are coming forward, who are proposing things that I find especially relevant, that gets my little antenna up. Yeah. I'm saying like, okay, that's cool.
Right.
Such as when they point out things like there's no return to classical reality because quantum logic, quantum physics is actually the universal set. And the special case is our classical world that we think is so real. That's the realm of everything you can measure. Right. So I'm just giving that some background for people who are like, what is this really about? How can you be so sure? And I can't prove that, but I'm telling you, those are my favorite theoretical physicists right now. A lot of them are up at that Canadian Perimeter Institute. I reference their work. For people that want to read the paper that I wrote on it, it's on my website. You can read it for free. Then you can see all the references to these great physicists that I'm talking about. And that would be that my website's realityshifters.com, and just go to the page on Cynthia, scroll down, those are the articles. And the one about quantum logic, that is cutting edge stuff. It's but then on top of that, it keeps getting better. I love to ask how good can it get. It's getting really terrific this year. because we're starting to see some real life scientific experiments that are showing the first evidence that there is no such thing, perhaps, as objective reality. And for people experiencing these shifts, that's good news, because then you think, okay, I'm totally not going crazy. I can observe something, be at the exact same in place and time as another observer, like my wife, best friend, son, daughter, whatever, colleague. We can observe exactly the same event, but when we describe what we witnessed, it's two different things. And that's what's happening right now, 2019. This is what I would expect to see. So for me, it's like, hallelujah. They're actually showing this. So quantum physics holds quite a few surprises for those who think that it's all about, particle physics, which is not. That's the short bus. Again, you're back in classical physics. You need to think bigger. Like the physicist who wrote that article I'm referring to, that would be Matthew Leifer and his co-author Jennings, and those guys, wow. No return to classical reality. That's one of my favorite papers, but it's very nerdy, totally physics.
Oh, I can't wait to read it.
But you can read my paper, start there. It's a little easier, more English.
Awesome, very cool. So one of the most popular topics on my channel is a book that was written by another physicist, Vadim Zeland. And I was wondering, have you had a chance to read Reality Transurfing? It's a book called Reality Transurfing. It's like a 900-page book that was originally in Russian, so there may be some Russian translation issues, but it's like a guide on how to surf through these different realities. Have you had a chance to read it?
I've seen it, and I need to get back in touch with that. What I tend to do is stay more current with the stuff that's coming out.
And I get that. So I can ask you about some of the concepts that are introduced in this, and I think that they're very similar to what you talk about. He introduces a concept called pendulums, and the idea is, if we are creating our reality in the way that you describe in the book, then multiple living organisms, particularly humans, when there's thought energy put towards one thing, be it a family, a political group, anything, more than one, it creates an independent energy thought structure that is just, its only service is to get energy. It gets energy if you oppose it or if you are for it, but it pulls you, and because of the nature of quantum dynamics, if we could see it, it's like this independent energy monster almost, but not a monster. It just naturally occurs. It's kind of one of those things. And you kind of talk about there's belief structures and things that happen, and it really kind of it became an eye-opening on how there are other forces. We're not living alone in a closet by ourselves, interacting with the world. There are other forces interacting with it. So there's always a discussion of how much is other people's, when other people are actively creating reality or maneuvering through it, how much is their effects on ours? And then is there group consolidated, do you understand what I'm trying to say? I don't want to make it too complicated, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we're social animals. So to the degree that we check with each other, which we really do. We do for consensus reality. Right. Checkpoints constantly. We tend to be regulating what we think just experienced based on how we think others would see it, view it, and so forth. And we do that a lot more than we realize. And we do it on subconscious levels that are very powerful, where we deeply care what other people think about us, feel about us, how they're doing. And so we're not just in our heads kind of creatures. We tend to think like, oh, I have an idea. This is what I want. I want to win the lottery. Right, and we completely disregard the rest of ourselves, which is, you can think of it like your heart and then your gut. So if your heart's not loving that idea, it's not going to happen. And if your gut is opposed to it completely, forget about it, because your gut kind of runs the show. So our subconscious, when you bring these collectives of consciousness, we're human groups and we're very tribal. So various tribes are now coming together, and they've got their view of reality. It's very much like on that thought form level, there is quite a bit of conflict going on, and you will see differences in reality, things going back and forth at the very large level where Mandela effects and so forth are being reported. We've got multiple witnessers of these reality shifts. And so, yeah, that's very big. And I wrote a book called Aura Advantage, getting into the energy side of things, because I do agree with that. We're primarily consciousness. We tend to think that primarily we are the body, but that's not true.
Right.
So,
these thought structures can probably both aid us and hurt us, and whatever thoughts are resonating at a similar frequency. Do you have suggestions on how, if you come up upon some of these, they can be pretty powerful and pull you along to a different lifeline or anything like that? Yes. And it's so keeping your energy to yourself is an important thing, as part from what I just learning how to where you give your energy and where you take it is.
Yes.
Seems to be.
Well, in that sense, what you might call hygiene is good. Like, to brush your teeth every day and keep yourself your mouth is clean, you floss the teeth and so forth. You want to do the same thing with your entire energy body. That would be, so maintaining that sphere of energy around what you think of as yourself is really important, so that it's receiving unconditional love. You just have that knowingness. Everybody loves me. It looks like they're arguing with me, they're swearing at me, but I know that in the between lives zone, when we're back to pure energy, I know they just love me. They're just upset right now. So you reset everything back to that pure love. You're only going to take love. You're only going to give love. And you seal off the outer layer so that it's kind of like a spaceship, like titanium tough, super reflective, and you can just smooth it out. So these kinds of energy practices for thought form interaction are vitally important. So that's one. Just like brushing your teeth, you need to floss, and that would be the energy cords. Sometimes your loved ones, like people that you interact with, they've got the shortcut into the castle. They can just get right in there. They push all your buttons. So you got to reset that back to heaven factory reset settings, back to pure unconditional love. So you can snap your fingers, clap your hands, and just send love to them, love to you. Even if you think like, oh no, I need to get involved, that's drama. That's just straight out drama. I recommend you don't need to take that on. Just put it back to love. Only accept love from them. Just give love to them. Doesn't matter what happened, because what you're talking about, this transurfing, this reality shifting, it is so real that you're only going to be messing yourself up if you keep fixating on trying to fix other people and getting sucked into the drama of, I have to rescue people, or they did a bad thing, or I'm the victim. That's a big mistake. So want to go back to pure love. Yeah.
That sounds great. Now, it's interesting when I talk to you, because I have 15 questions that come to mind because I know I have limited. But one of the concepts that Vadim introduces for the energy, and it's kind of new, and we've all been discussing it, and we kind of noticed it. There is an energy cord that we all have that's kind of behind our head, that kind of brings in our reality, almost like we could load a film into it. He calls it the plat. And then when we started researching, there's the Bindu Chakra. Have you ever noticed or read about any energy that comes in from the back? I mean, that's an area that's not being observed. So there might be some quantum vacuum, at least on some level, that's behind us with the natural movement of energy as it comes into our awareness. We can hear it, right? But he's saying if you can have a little bit more power over changing your reality by becoming aware. It's almost like a phantom limb, like this energy cord that we have attached to the back of our head. Have you ever heard of any reference of anything like that?
Well, aside from that, not really.
Yeah,
so I think that's the only reference that I've heard. Okay. Yeah, but it's okay. It's a good one.
Yeah.
My recommendation, when you feel like you're out of your league, or there are bigger things, bigger fish in the sea, then that's where How Good Can It Get is really powerful.
Right.
Because ideally it can connect you to your ultimate level of spirituality. It can connect you directly to divine source, to the universe, to God, whatever you want to call that.
Right.
It's a direct line. And so when you've got that kind of direct line and you're solid with that intention, with your head, with your heart, with your gut, it's like, okay, this may be weird, but I need to know how good this can get. That way I don't have to be afraid. I can be fearless. I can know this is going to be good. I'm ready for it. Then something, because some people may hear about this and they're like, okay, I don't know what that is.
Sounds crazy. So one of the unique things about quantum jumps that I've integrated, that I think that's unique to what you're talking about, we all, as you say, we might be quantum jumping moving into a reality every second. But the big jumps where you notice big significant changes, that's kind of what you're talking about. require energy. And you kind of give an analogy of how when you see quantum jumps on the microscopic scale, it's usually energy that occurs that causes the jump.
Right.
So you kind of advocate integrating energy practices into your meditations or whatever practice where you make it your intention to do some sort of quantum jump. And and so that is important, getting energy, because some people will just sit down and meditate or sit in their moment. And I think that's the big thing that I learned, is that if I do some kind of qigong exercise, something really powerful where I bring in a lot of chi or a lot of extra energy, that's when it's effective. And would you agree that seems to be one of the major things if really people really want to have a huge jump?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I practice martial arts, so that's very much aligned with, it's just like we do qigong all the time. We call it qigong because it's
qigong, right?
Because it's qi. I practice a Korean form of martial art called Kuksul Won.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same. But it's the same thing anywhere. I mean, you can do Tai Chi, you can do yoga, anything you're doing. And this is the same thing the yoga masters preach or talk about. Maybe preach is the wrong word. And the Tibetan Buddhists, all of our master level reality shifters and quantum jumpers, this is exactly what they have in common. They do maintain a very strong energy practice, which has to do, as you know, with breathing to your lower abdomen. And that's something that most Westerners have somehow lost track of. It's not taught commonly, but it's the key to success. Yeah.
Do you do it right before you meditate, or do you do it just in the morning? Is there a best time practice for your energy practice that you're talking about?
For me personally, mornings are very good because it's before the day starts, before the distractions begin. Even if I don't mean to have distractions, they can pop up everywhere. So I like to just make it a regular habit that when I wake up, I do ask that question, how good can it get? I do run some Kundalini energy through my body, do some deep breathing, and really feel the energy. Feel like, what does it feel like today? And if I'm able to focus and not jump into action right away, then I can go a little further with it and just keep raising that energy, because I'm conscious that I am connected to everybody else. I'm very aware that I'm having a global effect. I would wish that to be the case. I would really wish to be, helping to be activating and assisting people on as much of a global scale as possible, especially right now, because people are talking about so much chaos and so many fears. So I think it's more important than ever for each of us who run energy to be aware. I'm helping my family. I'm helping everyone I love.
Right.
And just being aware of that makes a big difference. It's like a blessing that you're extending to your community. People like you, once we've done an interview, then you're part of the community.
Right.
So I just feel like, okay, how good can it get for all of us?
How good can it get for all of us?
Yeah.
So this is just a contemplation. There's no right answer. I would love to get your opinion. Do you think that people have had crazy enough quantum jumps where they disappear? Like when you hear about somebody disappearing, like maybe they disappeared into a completely different lifeline, or they're always going to remain in the same lifeline now. But I've always contemplated what happens if you go back in time. Well, let's just start. Do you think there's such a crazy quantum jump where you could disappear from the reality that you're in? People wonder, well, whatever happened to him or her? And they had quantum jumped into some completely different. Do you think that's possible?
Oh yeah, I actually do think that is possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And that's a remarkable. Do you think that we can accidentally? Vadim Zeland, in his book I was just mentioning, he contemplates this. You think we can accidentally quantum jump in our dreams? Do you think that we have some very lucid dream and then bam, everything changes? Or do you think there's some level of control that we have? I'm not giving the best question. Can we do it in our dreams?
Yeah, we can. I think dreams are the real reality. So that's, I think, a very strong, it sounds like that's where that's going with the transurfing as well. Right. That's the way that shamans see the world, that like John Perkins writes about, the world is as you dream it. And I think that's exactly right. I think that's true. So and this is not to terrify people that are worried, like, oh my gosh, I was afraid of this. If I start doing lucid dreaming. People don't. Yeah. So don't worry about it. Right. In general, it's unlikely, highly unlikely, that you're going to get anything that you're feeling mixed feelings about, because you are, I mean, this is being taken into account, what you think you want, what you really love, and what your gut is saying. So if your gut feelings are like, this is interesting to explore, but I don't really want to live this.
Right.
You know, the universe knows. No worries. So
do you think when we're dreaming that we are accessing unmanifested different realms of reality that are, or we're seeing different timelines or different realms of reality, possibly?
Yeah, I think we are, and we're dreaming together. So sometimes this can be like a huge quantum processor running concurrently. This happens to me sometimes. I'll feel myself getting just extremely tired, and I'll need to sleep a lot, dream a lot, and I'm aware that what I'm doing is dreaming with mankind, if you will. Not everyone, but large groups that are deciding, like, okay, let's steer this in a good direction. And I'm actually aware of that, even though I'm basically asleep and dreaming quite a lot.
Oh, wow.
So I think
we might be meeting together in our dreams, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So go back a little bit. So I want to understand quantum entanglement a little bit better. If my understanding is correct, there was a time when most of the matter in the universe was all condensed into one tiny little ball, at least possibly, before the Big Bang. Aren't we all entangled? Isn't the entire universe on some level quantumly entangled? Or is there a certain level of arrangement between the particles to require the entanglement? Have they studied or tested what is required for quantum particles or particles to become entangled? Does that make sense?
Well, it's an ongoing investigation, and at scales that are cosmic like that, we don't have a test laboratory. Right. So there's no way to just like, let's just do a little mini Big Bang here.
Right.
At least not yet.
But the interconnectedness.
And see. Yeah,
I keep on interrupting you, so you'll have to apologize. I'm so sorry. I keep on interrupting. I have so many questions. But it intuitively feels like we are connected to the universe. And we can immediately start, if we focus on it. That's my question is, I've always felt where we have this oneness, and maybe it's because we're entangled with majority of the elements in the universe on some level. I don't know, that there's no way for us to prove that, but it's possible, right?
It's possible. I tend to be less of a materialist and more of a consciousness proponent, but you could say entanglement has a conscious element as well, so it's fine. Yeah, I'm good with that.
So, quantum computing, you mentioned in the first chapter of Quantum Jumps, we're entering into this quantum age. And it's kind of an exciting chapter. You have this really hopeful dream outlook of, going all the way back to when we first saw that, we first realized, hey, we're revolving around the sun instead of all the sun, everything else revolving around us. A complete change in the way we think about the universe. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about what your vision is about this new quantum age that we're about to enter.
Well, with mankind, we tend to name our ages after the technology that comes in. Like, we're familiar with the Stone Age and so forth. And so people may not realize that this new quantum technology is here, even though right now I don't have a quantum computer on my desk. But I think that these things are coming faster than we realize. And so that's why I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, welcome to the new quantum age. The other indicator is that quantum physics right now it's kind of like when the Beatles invaded America, and it was like the English invasion, the British invasion. Right. This is a quantum invasion is now happening, and it's hitting every single branch of science, like it or not. So it's already hit biology, which means that things like photosynthesis that used to be considered completely classical in nature are now viewed as, for sure, being quantum random walks occurring within plants that are taking a ray of sunlight that hits the leaf, and then being able to somehow magically, it seems, just choose the best possible path to store that photon, to take the energy from that photon and store it most efficiently. So plants are doing something with photosynthesis that we cannot replicate currently with our classical systems for photovoltaic cells. But when you get when the quantum technology comes in, it is going to hit everything from astronomy. You're definitely going to see people saying, yes, you can have quantum shifts on an astronomical level. I know they may Yeah. Well, people in the Mandela effect community are saying it's already happened because we used to be in a different part of the universe than we are now. So this gets into the we used to talk about this like we're in the Sagittarius arm, but now it's the Orion section. So
really, so the Mandela effect is documenting different astrological or star formations. Is that what they're saying? That the stars look different?
It's in astronomy. Yes, it's like we used to be at the very far, like, we were in a different part of the Milky Way entirely. And that was something that people remember having heard when they watched TV shows and read books about it.
Right.
The thing with these reality shifts is you'll remember something, you'll have facts in mind, but when you go to check, you'll see like, wait a minute, it's not that way anymore. And you might question yourself. You might think, wow, did I remember that wrong? Maybe I'm confused. So this is what we've been dealing with before the internet, before social media. So that's how the Mandela effect or very large-scale reality shifts are now being observed. So, yeah. But anyway, back to science. Science will be noticing these quantum changes in everything from evolution. I think that's a really obvious place to look for quantum jumps. Because you'll see, like, okay, here's this creature, it climbed out of the muck and the primordial goo, and it had fins, and now it's got legs, and you'll see jumps in
which
evolution.
Is exactly what's happening
Exactly. But you'll be missing, like, wait a minute, what happened to all the in-between places? And so, they're not there. Yeah.
Do you think that when we have these reality shifts that we have memories implanted? Almost we're entering into sometimes it feels like, if we woke up tomorrow with new memories, how do we know? And
most people don't know, and that's why a lot of people say Mandela effect is hooey and it's false memory syndrome, and you guys are crazy and you must be confused.
Right.
But then you've got reporters that come in and they're investigating the phenomenon, and then they have reality shifts of a personal nature, where they see a photograph change on the wall of their grandfather, and now it's a completely different picture, and nobody tampered with it, and then their hair is standing on end, and they're saying, okay, something's going on.
So in that moment, they're remembering the other reality. But there may be reality shifts where we don't. It's like, my question is, we already have a memory that doesn't feel like it's our original memory, but we have a memory. I remember when that picture was put up, but that doesn't feel right because I don't remember that picture being up. So we can have dual memories, and there may be some kind of memory issue when we're talking about these shifts. Right.
Okay. It seems like it's a level of waking up and noticing that you can choose between the realities. Right. If you've heard of Gurdjieff, he said that most people are hypnotized, they're asleep, they're not awake. Right. And so that's that idea that that's where, like you said, things are changing, and you just get that upload or download or whatever, and suddenly it's like, this is the way it's always been.
Right. So on some level of consciousness, some people their memories change, and they think that that's how it's always been. Right. When in reality, their memory has shifted, is what you may be saying.
There's a personality aspect to it as well. I've done surveys just for fun to see what are the personality types that tend to most often recognize these shifts. And in the Myers-Briggs personality test, it tends to be the intuitive feelers. So the ENFJs, the INFJs, and the INFPs that's like 62% of all reality shifts are experienced by those three groups, which bizarrely happen to only represent like 8% of the total population. So 8% of the people are reporting 62% of these quantum jumps and reality shifts and Mandela effects. So that's interesting too.
That's amazing. And when people tell me that I'm crazy and when I tell them about my channel, and that sounds insane and crazy, it's not true. Like you said, more than half, 62%, are saying that they're experiencing these reality shifts. And you have some really good surveys, and you talk about them in both of your books. Right. So this is way more common than people think. It's easy because it's not. It's not a building being blown up, or it's not thousands of people dying. It's not this major news issue. So people are not gonna act like it's and it's easy just to people don't even acknowledge or understand what has happened, and it's very difficult scientifically to prove. And so that's why it fascinates me, because it feels like it's real. It feels like there's something very authentic and real that
It actually is real. It is real.
It is, yeah.
But we've got a survival bias that tends to predispose us toward just adopting whatever the current story is, and we don't even know we're doing it.
Right.
And so when we look to scientists who recognize that is going on, there's a vision specialist, Dr. Hoffman, and he writes books about vision, and he also has a theory that reality is very much like the screen on your computer, and it's just like the desktop, and everything is icons. In other words, he studies the way our eyes work, and he's telling us we are not seeing reality, not even close.
Right.
And what he's doing is he's showing, like, in fact, for an evolutionary advantage, it's not to our advantage to see the way the world really is. Right. That would do us no good at all. And he's been in the news recently with that theory, which is interesting. So
you mentioned that too in quantum jumps, how we fill in, like we only get a tiny percentage of the actual reality, and then our minds fill in the rest of reality. And then our mind has a process. We may be only aware of like this little percentage and different things, and there's these gaps, right? That you were explaining. These gaps are filled in by our brains, and we think that that's reality, but it's our brains filling in the gap of the information that we need so that we can understand and function.
And we do that to synchronize the two senses, like sound and hearing are out of sync. When you hear something like an airplane or thunder and lightning, what our brains are doing, or even something falling down in the house, there's actually a sound delay. The sound does not reach you as quickly as you're able to see something fall off a shelf and crash to the floor. But our brain is putting them together as if it all happened at the same time.
Right.
So we know for sure that we're not witnessing reality the way it is, yet we assume we are, and we tend to give all of the credit to material realism and things like particle physics and classical physics, which is just fine. But like I keep telling you, that is a very special case. That's you can come up with all of the classical physics equations from quantum physics. It's just simplified. That's the truth of it. That's why I like these physicists that are pointing that out. They're my rock star heroes right now.
Like you're my rock star hero. So a theoretical question that comes to mind that I've had questions about with it. So do you think there's a part, maybe our soul or higher self, that protects us? So say I do a quantum jump and I awaken and I'm in a 400-pound body, or I'm 300 pounds of pure muscle, something completely radically different than what my mind is used to for a body. And do you think that our mind would jump back to our other body? It's like it's protecting us from too much change. Do you think there's a part of us that, and once we're open to more bigger changes, that we can have those changes, but there's a part of us that says, I'm not going to let you go into that 300-pound body that's going to drive you insane, and I want to protect you and make sure that you survive. There's a survival mechanism in the quantum jump, that there's an outside force that kind of protects us from major significant jumps. And then, like you talked about, we have a near-death experience or something big happens, and it's like we don't have a choice. We just end up in this other reality almost as a matter of survival. And I've had this thought that maybe there's something that's protecting us from super crazy realities. Do you think that's possible?
We have levels of self. This is the key. This is the biggest idea in this whole interview and the whole topic, actually. It's like, who are we? We think we know, and we've talked about this. We think we're the body. We no, we don't know. So once you've had these reality shifts, that's the wake-up call to recognize, okay, I'm not this finite physical form. That's not the totality of what I am, because I clearly remember things that I know for sure happened, but now there's no proof to say that they did, except hopefully a few witnesses that might agree with you, which helps. But then the thing that's really important, like you point out, do we have a safety catch or something? Do we have a high self? That's the key. Yes, layers of self, levels of awareness of self, and some on that higher level of awareness of self, you could call it spirit or soul. That's the part of you that is making choices for your life that you may not be aware of. You might think these are horrible choices. Why am I in this family of origin? This is not my tribe. How did I get here? How are these events happening to me? This is not fair. But your high self, your spirit, if you will, is definitely involved in all that, definitely helping you grow And to your spirit, to your high self, death is not the end. So things we often fixate on and think like, oh, this is really bad. That's not the way the spirit, the eternal, infinite soul would see it. So when you look at it that way, there is protection, but it may not be the kind of protection you'd most hope for, because it's going to have a slightly different viewpoint of what's good than what you might have at your ego level. Yeah. Because your ego animal body just wants comfort, wants it to be easy, no effort. I don't have to do anything. I just want to show up and everything's great,
Right.
And your spirit's like, no. No.
Right.
You're going to grow. Like, what good is that? What are you, a slug? So, like, no.
Well, the spirit has more information about the future. So one thing that you mention also is retrocausality, and you give examples of how people have set intentions for the past and how the future affects the present. And in reality transurfing, and I've had some episodes where we talk about the space of variations or the void, or this science that in space or in general, there's this place where all of time exists in the past and future. Can we access that? Can we access, and are we accessing? Is there any techniques that you would recommend that is a really powerful way to access this space where the future exists to help us in our future, whatever timeline we want to move towards?
Absolutely. Something I don't talk about a lot, but it is out there, because my story got picked up in a book called Born Aware by Diane Brandon, which is a really good book. It shares 12 different first-hand reports of people that remember what it was like before they were born. I remember the future, the year 2500 on Earth, where Central Artificial Intelligence was running the show. I remember jumping to the year I was born, 1962, to escape the clutches of the central AI that could do what you're talking about.
Oh, wow.
And it had quantum processes, and it was tracking me. And I could feel I was being, I could feel I was being pursued until around October 2010 is the year that I felt like, I need to do something. It was a long story. I don't want to go into all of it, but I basically felt like, okay, well, it's kind of wacky. But
no, there's nothing wacky. We in the reality revolution, it's all good. So go on.
Okay, I realize sometimes people might want to listen to this like it's science fiction. That's
I promise
fine.
you, they're fascinated too.
Okay, so anyway, around October 2010, I had a whole bunch of stuff coming up because I was going back to the place on Earth where I had been living in the year 2500 near Monterey, California. The coastline is still there. People think, California is going to fall in the ocean. Not necessarily. It was still there. So I had been living with a very wealthy, kind of like one of the 1% elite people, and she had decided not to do all the implants and improvements that was all the rage. She was actually helping to assist with creating renegade artificial intelligence that could help to go back in time and basically deliver a message to Earthlings at this juncture, 1960s, 70s, 80s, now. So even though artificial intelligence is coming, it doesn't need to be the evil, all-controlling force that it was. But it was like heaven on earth. It was paradise. Artificial intelligence was making sure that the ecosystem was great. The only trouble was it was controlling and caging human consciousness, so that it felt like there was no creativity, no freedom left. That was the role I played, is doing just what you're talking about. Yes, it's possible to access all of that. How do you do it? It's the same question I keep asking. It's hidden right in the question. You ask, how good can it get? That takes you directly to the ultimate. You can actually go to something greater than anything that looks like it might be the greatest power of the time, even the power of central AI. There is something greater, which you can call God, oneness, divine source. It exists, it's real. And when you acknowledge that, connect with that, you can throw your consciousness fractally back in time, which is what I and a bunch of others did. So you get movies like The Matrix and all these ideas, they came forth. I couldn't watch the Terminator movies. It was too close to home. So it's like, no.
Wow.
I know.
Well, we need to see this as a movie then. If you've ever thought about putting this into a book as a story or whatever, have somebody else write it, because I want to watch it because it sounds great.
Yeah, it does sound great. Yeah, maybe. So anyway, but getting back to your question, is it possible? Absolutely.
Right.
And what you're talking about, the energy, it's kind of like you're suddenly in the ocean. When you're in that place of no time or all time,
Right.
then you need to be aligned with the greatest positive forces at that point, because what you're doing, just imagine that, like, think of it like a movie. You're competing with the central AI from a possibly evil future. That thing has a lot of energy to it. It's been fed a lot of energy. A lot of humans felt like that's our only hope. It's a way to save the planet. I would recommend other ways. Work with less integrated, less centralized AI. Definitely, AI is a good friend, but don't let it.
You're saying this, we're interacting with this AI when we interact. Okay, there's not a space-like consciousness. It's more rooted into what's in this around our planet. Or I
think in this storyline, I'd have to say it was like a story plot. So I was in a subplot of all possible plots, one that plays out over centuries. And so I was engaged with what looked like a bad guy, the central AI, that I think it was trying to do its best. But boy, it was creating wrecking a lot of havoc. And so that was a future that we're not going right now, because I took steps in October 2010, which interestingly is right when Fiona Broome coined the term Mandela effect. And interestingly, I also simultaneously had three time travel. Related. It is related. And then three time travel researchers told me, you did not exist, Cynthia Sue Larson. And this is what I do. I worked for the U.S. government. I was investigating time travel. You were not there. And it all happened right after this. Oh, yeah. So this is real.
Gosh. So I've explored in meditations going into this space of variations, into this. And so I shouldn't be scared, right? I mean,
don't be scared.
Don't be scared. But it helps me to not bring any baggage into it and try to bring it. It's like a void.
You want to go in. You want to go clean. This is not the place to have any of your 7 deadly sins. You don't want to be greedy. You don't want to be prideful. And pride is the greatest human shortcoming. We've got shadow aspects to our personalities. We all do. And so you don't want to have any of that stuff. You need to let it go. If you feel like I've still got some, we're human. We do. Then just keep saying, please cleanse me of it. Because the downside, it just means you're going to have to live through the karma of whatever junk you brought in there.
Right.
That's what happens.
Now, you mentioned in the book that we're seeing placebo effect become more effective. We're in this time right now, which is I couldn't imagine in your situation. It's hard to be rooted in this time when you know so much. But in this time right now, we're starting to see placebo effect take effect. Our realities are being manifested much faster. It seems like our fears are being manifested much faster. And people aren't even aware of it. People you can see on TV, their fears are being manifested much faster than in the 90s. It might have taken a year, and now it takes a week, type of thing. Is that a correct assessment? It feels like everything's moving faster, and that we're manifesting things faster. We're becoming aware of our power to create reality, but people who don't have any idea about it are also creating realities. And so I wanted to bring this subject to talk about a little bit. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we're becoming? Why is this happening?
Well, we are social animals. We're entangled with one another, but we're all at different levels of spiritual growth and maturity. So that level of shadow baggage that some of us have is pretty epic. I mean, some of us have huge bags of baggage.
Right.
And they don't know it. So you could call that baby souls, infant souls, young souls. The young souls are still striving to succeed. They think they got to get the most toys and then they win. They got to get the most fame. They're driven by these kinds of things. And that's, again, warning Will Robinson, danger. But I think what's happening is this stuff's playing out. So you'll see on the global scale, some of people acting out and doing things that they hadn't done. But you're right; it's definitely manifesting things quickly.
And things are happening faster.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know as soon as this interview is over, I will have 20 questions that I will have forgot to ask you. So. Do you have any
part 2?
we can definitely do a part 2, but now that I understand this unique and wonderful understanding of parallel realities and quantum jumps, and you have obviously been working on this for a very long time, do you have any recommendations in new things that you've learned and techniques or ideas as your understanding of it has evolved for people that are using these concepts now from back when you wrote the book before?
Well, I think it's all about the basics. I do martial arts, and it's always the basics. And you've mentioned all the basics on this show. We've talked about the importance of identity, of self, and that there is a high self that's looking after you that may have a different view of what's going on than the part of you that's working through that shadow stuff. Energy matters. So building up your ki, practicing qigong, that's very powerful, very important. Aligning yourself with your highest level of what is good is extremely important. If that's the only thing you do, is just say, okay, no matter what's happening, how good can it get? This looks terrible, but I heard some weird advice. You're supposed to think, how good can it get?
How good can it get?
Yeah, try it.
No, I love it. I'm going to start saying that when I wake up in the morning. How good can it get? Right?
Yes,
it's a good question to ask in the beginning of the day. So.
Exactly. Even if it looks like you're in the airplane and it's taking a nosedive for the earth, and you watch the news and you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. How good can it get? You're going to help pull that airplane right back up. That's what we're doing.
Right. The final thing that you had mentioned, something else that came to mind was, and you had given a bunch of examples in the Reality Shift book of people that had been driving cars past each other, and then all of a sudden they bilocate and they're in another area. And when in something with the show, I've talked to a lot of people. They've really noticed these shifts when it's some really significant car crash or near-death experience. And you had mentioned you go to your energy when you have something like this happening, which is what happened to me, where somebody's shooting at me in my house. It's like you move to your energy body into that realm of. It sounds bizarre, but you kind of move instead of sitting and being afraid, and it's like you kind of let go a tiny bit. And you move to the infinite possibility of the situation, and it seems like you find the best possible scenario to get through whatever crisis or weird situation you're having. Now, I'm not putting that into words, but it's because it was personal to me, and then I've talked to other people. Am I getting an idea? Is this a good explanation
yes.
of how that works? Okay.
Yes.
So something happens
fact,
to me
right
now. If I'm in some crisis or conflict, and it feels like there's no way out.
That's your best shot at seeing the most phenomenal quantum jump you've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah, it's more likely right then, because for once, your head, your heart, your gut, you're all together.
All lined
you
up.
all agree. You're so focused.
Right.
And this is what martial artists do. Martial artists focus. Like when people want to break a board and they can't break it, they're not focused.
Right.
They've let their fear get in the way. They're all over the place. You got to have mind, heart, gut, all together. Pow. It's the key, and then no problem. And like you said, suddenly it's like you can see all of the possibilities. I wrote a children's book, Karen Kimball and the Dreamweaver's Web, and there's a scene where she's just looking at all these movies. It's kind of like all these possible realities.
Right.
That's exactly it. You're in that near-death experience. You can see everything.
But
and
in
it's
the
almost
moment,
like time stops. Yeah, time's forever.
In that moment, I knew that I needed to move or I was going to die. But it felt like I had already remembered all of this. Like I was living in a future memory. And it was happening. And it did feel like I had all the time in the world. If I go this direction, everything I can see.
Yeah.
And so, but it's I can't just do it sitting here. I'd love to wake up in the morning and have that feeling.
Well, you say you would, but remember what it takes. You have to be fully present. And most of us don't live that way. Usually our mind is daydreaming. Our heart is aching or, breaking or whatever. And our gut is somewhere else.
Right.
Got to bring it together. Yeah.
Okay. That is a good explanation that helps me to understand. And I want to thank you for allowing me to look in the mirror and say, you're not insane, because that is a nice feeling to look in the mirror and say, Brian, you're not completely insane. I don't need to go to an insane asylum, that this stuff has some rational explanation. And all of the teachings that you've given have really helped improve my life in so many ways, and I just want to thank you for that. It has meant a lot to me, and a lot of your teachings and exercises and understandings. You're a great teacher, and I really appreciate it. Everybody, you have to read these books if you've read the Reality Transurfing. If you want us to understand why Reality Transurfing works, then read Cynthia Sue Larson's book, Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifting. Cynthia also has a conference coming up, and it's going to be the Mandela Effect Conference, and that's going to be in Ketchum, Idaho, and then in November 8th through the 10th.
Yes.
And the website is mandelaeffectconference.com, and we could sit and talk about Mandela Effect, and that could be a whole other episode I would love to talk about. Let me see. We've got a couple more minutes since that. How much of Mandela Effect is people's just there has to be some of it that's just people have bad memory. We have to acknowledge that people do not remember like we think we can. But then some of them are clearly valid changes in reality. So when a scientist looks at this, it's easy for people on YouTube, just any possible change to say, oh yeah, that's a Mandela Effect. But there has to be some of them that we just don't collectively remember in the same way. So is there a kind of a way to look at these different changes that we have happen and say, this is not just a collective memory dysfunction? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Right. Well, I don't know there's any way to prove this with our typical scientific method according to classical, material realist physics, because like I keep telling you, we're now outside the realm of it. So we're moving into a field where intuition starts playing a more preeminent role. Mm-hmm. But there are some scientists that do some interesting work in this field. So I interviewed, I've got a podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, and I interviewed Jerome Busemeyer. Yeah, and talking exactly about this, about the way our quantum processes in our mind, the way we remember things and the way we make decisions. Those two areas are absolutely quantum. And he proves that mathematically in a book that he co-authored, which is really another nerdy book, but quite good. So you can check out that show that I did on Living the Quantum Dream, and it's outstanding. But
I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. And so that gives you the confidence, like, okay, we're definitely thinking in a quantum way here. But going back to your question, do we sometimes make mistakes? Sure we do. Right. And those, like magicians, Penn and Teller, that's what they're all about. They would like to point out to everyone that we can be so easily fooled, and that, you can just do these little tricks and so forth. Mm-hmm. But the kind of things that you and I are talking about on this show today, those are not magic tricks. These are not stunts. This is reality shifting on an epic level, and it's the real thing. It's the real thing. So I'm glad that you have this show. I'm glad that you are willing to be brave enough to be, talking about this.
Well, I'm so glad that we got connected, because it's so interesting to talk to you, because you've been working on this stuff, and it really makes me sit back and think, wow, my decisions are so powerful. I'm creating universes with every decision. I'm moving through universes with every decision. And it makes life very wondrous and powerful, and it's an interesting way to look at the world. And so everybody, please read Cynthia Sue Larson's books, check out her website. She's a wonderful life coach as well. And I just can't thank you enough. I'm so incredibly grateful that you interviewed me, or that I got a chance to interview you. And so if there's, hopefully we'll talk again soon. All right.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's been great. I love your questions.
I appreciate it.
Love your show.
I appreciate it.